What is urban landscape? It is defined as the traits, patterns, and structure of a city-specific geographic area, including its biological composition, its physical environment, and its social patterns. Urban landscape can be viewed as comprehensive and holistic view on the open spaces and points to the structuring of the city. The landscape is planned, designed, or shaped to convey humans' intention and is affected by the social, physical, and natural context in which it is embedded. Urban landscape is an integral part of modern urban construction. They help to create a favorable, wholesome, and helpful environment, serve as recreation areas for working people, and contribute to the expressiveness of architectural ensembles. To design a general landscape, these are the 6 principles to follow: focal point, texture, color, scale and proportion, grouping and repetition, and the last one, rhythm and sequence. Focal point helps in 2 ways. First, it adds emphasis to important areas of the garden that help us to fully appreciate the design and enable us to easily move around the garden. Second, it helps to turn an ordinary garden into an exceptionally memorable one. Secondly, texture. It is an important element towards creating a mood or a sense of place, as mood is often referred to in the gardening world. Thirdly, colors. Colors are used in a simple color palette for each project. It only emphasizes the essential elements within the design. Basically, an analog color palette uses color suggestion on the color wheel. Fourthly, scale and proportion. Scale and proportion are used for comfort purposes. The garden elements must relate to the human body. Users, they will feel balanced and harmonious in a garden when proportion and scales are correctly used. Next is the grouping. When plants are grouped accordingly, observers will get the most visual pleasure from a given landscape. Besides, it provides a sense of unity and completeness rather than dissonance. Last but not least, repetition, rhythm, and sequence. It is deliberately used in some form of repeated element to unify and create the illusion of motion. Moving on to urban landscape principles. There are 13 principles, and first of all, there is planning. Planning helps with appropriate design and capital budgets. It also helps with ongoing maintenance requirements. Then, there is character. Character contributes to the character and legibility of the rural and urban environment and the road's users' experience. By creating landmarks along a journey, highlight views and denote the presence of communities. Plant selection is another principle. Plants are usually sourced locally. Native species support local biodiversity and landscape distinctiveness. It also helps create connections between random native vegetation. Using flowering trees help provide seasonal color. The next principle would be buffer. By planting strips of bushes or flowers, it helps separate the carriageway from the footpath. Buffering also helps to lower the traffic noise. Earthwork is another principle. Earthwork helps minimize the need for benching. Cutting and filling batters should be feathered into the natural landform. Moving on, it is safety. The safetiness for road users and pedestrians must always be considered during the process of designing urban landscape. Trees should be located outside the clear zones and always away it from the utilities. Soil is another principle. Using topsoil compaction, inadequate topsoil depth, and mixing of topsoil and subsoil will reduce the plant success rate of growing. When planting, it is encouraged to use organic, living, or gavel mulches. Screening, it is one of the most common principles in urban landscaping. Screen planting should not obstruct important views. It is advisable to select plants with minimum maintenance regime. Inspection, one of the most important principles among all. It is always necessary to inspect the plants and topsoil. Why? It is to ensure the quality of product and alignment with the planting plans and specification. Consider the space is also a principle. When designing an urban landscape design, it requires adequate space for landscape treatment. Having narrow strips of land will generally result in poor landscape outcomes. Next, it will be ecological services. It is required to support ecological processes, augment existing habitats, reinstate wildlife corridors and connections, filter stormwater runoff, and improve air quality. Maintenance. By recreating natural landscapes, it can minimize maintenance requirements and increase their ecological value. Finally, the last principle would be having a low-impact design. By implementing low-impact stormwater devices, it helps to reduce attenuation and road runoff. Low-impact design is always encouraged to integrate with pedestrian and cycle networks and contribute to local amenity. Definition of sustainable urban landscape. A sustainable urban landscape achieves the correct balance between environmental, economic, and social needs. It does not tell us how to find a balance, but it implies on landscape architects, assuming they are to be involved, having some kind of knowledge, skill, or training which lets them decide what is correct. What is sustainable urban landscape? Sustainable landscape architecture is a category of sustainable design concerned with the planning and design of outdoor spaces. An outdoor space is likely to last longer and give more commodities to its owner if it requires low inputs of energy, water, or fertilizer. When did sustainable urban landscape start? Sustainable urban landscape starts out from the fact that cities of today are no longer isolated. It should be treated on a regional scale. Sustainability is not only a matter of environmental fit and effectiveness, it also implies the concept of livable cities, which cities that are attractive to live and work in. Why is sustainable urban landscape important? It is important because conventional urban landscape requires high maintenance costs. It is solved by utilizing sustainable landscape practices such as conserving resources, reducing chemical applications, and by reducing labor inputs. Sustainable urban landscape is encouraged because it is less expensive and it is easier to maintain. The key to create a sustainable landscape is by understanding that the design process should be considered first. Plant selection, implementation, and maintenance built on the design process, each having sustainability as a major consideration. The whole idea is to create outdoor spaces that are functional, maintainable, environmentally sound, cost-effective, and aesthetically pleasing. 这样不爽了，还有加温很长。How to create sustainable urban landscape? It is by designing gardens to suit local environmental conditions. It is wise to select plants with low supplementary water requirements. Selecting non-invasive plants and conserving water are also advisable. It is also necessary to provide habitat to local native faunas. There are still many ways to create sustainable urban landscape by avoiding use of harmful chemicals. minimizing non-renewable energy consumption, and by using sustainable and locally sourced products and materials. And finally, materials and methods used in our projects all consider waste. And finally, materials and methods used in our projects are all considered in water and energy conservation, waste minimization, pollution prevention, and biodiversity. What is urban forest? An urban forest is the sum of all trees and associated vegetation located in a city, town, or community on public or private lands. The concept of the urban forest has evolved over time and space and has been associated with many diverse purposes. The implementation and management of urban forests is known as urban forestry, which has an array of associated methodology and techniques. The history and development. Ancient Egyptians recorded descriptions of trees being transplanted in their cities 4,000 years ago. Tree planting around temples in Greek and Roman civilizations was commonplace, no real standardized pattern or structure existed for incorporating trees into the city layout. In ancient Chinese cities, trees planted along the rivers and streets for shades. By the end of the 16th century, the inclusion of large gardens in aristocratic estates has spread to Europe and was beginning to become a more essential feature of the urban landscape, where rows of trees associated with the gardens served as the default road on which roads were built. In the 17th century Renaissance Italy, large gardens were included in their villa design. As villas become more and more prevalent, their gardens become more elaborately designed and more intricately incorporated into the social activities of the aristocratic community. 18th century until the present day. The proliferation of urban trees was further supported by the increasing leisure and recreational time of the upper classes. In 18th century France, urban forestry was seen as an essential element of embellishment, which was a large-scale movement towards improving city life, not only aesthetically, but also in terms of sanitation and quality of the urban environment. What does the urban forestry need? Urban forestry need to be planned, integrated, and systematic. It is an approach to urban tree management which itself should be stressed. And what are the benefits of the urban forestry? The economic benefits that urban forests provide include attracting tourists and business by creating an inviting place to stay, increasing the property value of homes and industrial properties, and also reducing heat and cooling costs. The environmental benefits that urban forest provides include: first, providing food and habitat for wildlife. Secondly, it absorbs carbon dioxide, replenish oxygen in the atmosphere, and decrease the heat island effect. Thirdly, it reduces the stream sedimentation through erosion. It decreases the stormwater runoff and lowers the air temperature throughout the shade. Last but not least, it controls the air and noise pollution. The social benefits that urban forests provides include adding character and pride to communities, creating feelings of relaxation and well-being, promoting a sense of community ownership, providing privacy by absorbing noise and screening harsh scenery, encourage community interaction by offering space for interaction, and provide educational opportunities. And the last one, it promotes safe driving. There are actually ways to promote urban forests in a more sustainable way, and one of them, it is green roofs. Green roofs control stormwater runoff, provide urban green spaces, lower heating and cooling costs, and can provide recreational areas that expand the usable footprint of a structure. Green Building Index (GBI) assesses the building's performance based on the six main criteria, which are energy efficiency, indoor environment quality, sustainable site planning and management, materials and resources, water efficiency, and innovation.